Cascadia was born of fire and ice. This string of 19 volcanic peaks stretched from Canada to California. Sulfur, lava, ocean mist, evergreens, and fog commingle to create one of the world's most haunting, mysterious places. Rumor has it a subterranean network of lava tubes connect the mountains. From ancient alien civilizations, to Sasquatch, to legends of the Watchers, to underground libraries gilt in gold, to the unexplained missing person cases. Curious Cat will explore the origins of those dark rumors in search of truth. Yes, folks, lace up your hiking boots. We are venturing into the woods of the Cascade Mountain Range for an unforgettable Season 3. Find all Cascadia episodes wherever you stream Curious Cat. Special season art was created by @Nora's Unnamed Photos. Follow them on Instagram and find their products at Society 6. I grew up in eastern Washington, a stone's throw from the mighty waters of the Columbia River. We waded on its mossy rocks to better view hydroplanes as they skimmed the surface. We dove down to its murky depths for sweet relief in the scorching summer months, hoping a catfish didn't touch us. And once, I fished out a slick algae-covered $20 bill just miles away from the place where D.B. Cooper was rumored to have dropped his ill-gotten fortune. I spent countless hours swimming, floating, boating, fishing, rock skipping, and exploring its waters. Even more hours running, biking, and walking, and in a few instances, making out near its muddy banks. This is the only river that crosses through the Cascade Mountain Range that was not born in its peaks. Paranormal experts find that water is a conduit to the supernatural, amplifying energies. Is that why the Columbia River is rife with dark rumors? Let's get into it. Let's start with the basics, Columbia River facts. The Columbia River is a massive freshwater anomaly. It's the only river that does not originate in the Cascade Mountain Range that entirely intersects it. In fact, the river begins in the high Rockies of southwest Canada. From reference.com, the Columbia River runs east to west a length of 1,243 miles. Locks, dams, and reservoirs built on the river alter its depth, which ranges anywhere from 20 to 170 feet. The mighty Columbia's flow and tributaries produce more than 44% of the United States' total hydroelectric power. From Wikipedia, the Columbia River flows through southern British Columbia, central Washington, and forms a portion of the Washington-Oregon boundary before emptying into the Pacific Ocean. It's the largest river in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. Its largest tributary is the Snake River. Its drainage basin is roughly the size of France and extends into 7 of the United States plus a Canadian province. The river system hosts many species of anadromous fish that can survive in fresh and salt water, that migrate between freshwater habitats and the saline waters of the Pacific Ocean. These fish, especially the salmon species, provided the core subsistence for native people. The first documented European discovery of the Columbia River occurred when Bruno de Heceta sighted the river's mouth in 1775. On May 11, 1792, a private American ship, Columbia Rediviva, under Captain Robert Gray from Boston, became the first non-indigenous vessel to enter the river. Later that year, William Robert Broughton of the British Royal Navy, commanding the HMS Chatham as part of the Vancouver expedition, navigated past the Oregon Coast Range and 100 miles upriver to what's now Vancouver, Washington. In the following decades, fur trading companies used the Columbia as a key transportation route. Overland explorers entering the Willamette Valley through the scenic but treacherous Columbia River Gorge, and pioneers began to settle the valley in increasing numbers. Steamships along the river linked communities and facilitated trade. The arrival of railroads in the late 19th century, many running along the river, supplemented these links. But I have to ask, are the waters of the mighty Columbia amplifying supernatural energies? Okay, I can almost detect the faint smile and skepticism from you here, but stick with me a second. From sciencing.com. If you've never heard that it's dangerous to go swimming during a lightning storm, consider yourself warned. The water in natural sources such as lakes, rivers, and streams, as well as that in pools and hot tubs, is an excellent electricity conductor. And if you're in contact with the water when lightning hits, you'll probably be electrocuted. However, it's not the water itself that's the problem. Distilled water wouldn't carry the same risk. The minerals dissolved in natural water and pool water are responsible for its conductivity. They turn pure water, which is an electrical insulator, into an electrolyte. So I was partly wrong. It's not the water of the Columbia that's responsible for conductivity, but the ions, the minerals and salts in the Columbia's waters that may be amplifying any energies from other dimensions or even this dimension. And some memory recorded on the molecules of the river rocks, i.e. the stone tape theory, could be making that possible. The stone tape theory suggests that any large energy event, a tragedy or a big emotional burst that occurs around stone or rock is in some level recorded into the molecules. It can play back under certain specific conditions if given the right power source, any power source. If you research the way recordings are made on celluloid tape, for example, then the idea is similar. So imagine stone theory is real, and those stones that lie in the bed of the Columbia River, which is an electrical conduit running over those stone tapes, playing it back over and over. Well, that's the recipe for some serious supernatural playbacks. We don't have to look far to find extraordinary discoveries in the waters of the Columbia, though. Have you ever heard of Kennewick Man? I cannot wrap my brain around the notion that the discovery of what was initially called Kennewick Man occurred 27 years ago this July. It feels like yesterday when the young men, allegedly trying to sneak into the hydroplane races for free, literally stumbled on the skeletal remains of what would become a hot controversy for 2 decades. I found an article in the Yakima Herald Republic that recaps this epic series of events perfectly. Authored by Donald W. Myers, he mentions that the discovery of what is now called the Ancient One would trigger a 20-year legal battle between Native Americans and scientists. In the article, he says, the controversy pitted oral tradition against science, and ending with science validating the Native American belief that their people populated the Columbia Plateau for millennia. The Ancient One's modern odyssey began July 28, 1996, when 2 men, Will Thomas and Dave Deasy, were wading along the Columbia River's banks near Kennewick during the water follies. Some accounts say the men were trying to avoid the gate fee for the event's hydroplane races. And I have to make a note. I mean, come on, man. It's expensive to go to the hydroplane races. He continues, though. Thomas, wading about 10 feet from the bank, hit something underwater that he thought was a rock. Instead, what he pulled up was a human skull, complete with teeth. The men stashed the skull along the riverbank, watched the boat races, and then went to police with their find. While authorities initially thought the skull could have belonged to either a drowning or homicide victim, then Benton County Coroner Floyd Johnson thought the remains looked unusually old. He enlisted help from James Chatters, a self-employed anthropologist, who then scoured the riverbank where the skull was found and eventually finding more than 350 bones and fragments. A month later, Chatters announced at a news conference that the nearly complete skeleton was more than 9,000 years old, based on radiocarbon dating. Subsequent studies would roll back that estimate to 8,500 years, that there was a stone spear point embedded in the man's pelvis. But Chatter said that based on measurements of the skull, the Ancient One more closely resembled Europeans than Native Americans. Despite Chatter's assertion that he was not saying Europeans were the first settlers of the North American continent, it didn't stop the speculation. One reconstruction of the skull's facial features resembled British actor Sir Patrick Stewart. That suggestion did not sit well with Native Americans, who insisted from the beginning that the Ancient One was an ancestor and needed to be returned to them for reburial under the terms of the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. The 1990 Act required that remains in museum collections be returned to the tribes with which they were affiliated, as well as declaring that any remains discovered on federal land belonged to the tribe with the closest affiliation. Armin Minthorn, a member of the Confederate Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservations Board, raised the first challenge, as the Umatilla were the closest tribe to where the remains were found. He was joined by representatives of the Yakima Nation in asking the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, whose jurisdiction included the burial site, to ensure the bones were not further tested. How would you feel if we came into your cemetery and dug up your ancestors? Minthorn asked in a 1996 interview with the Seattle Times. The Corps took possession of the remains, which were held in the Pacific Northwest National Lab in Richland, Washington, while the dispute was sorted. The Umatilla, Yakima, Colville, Wanapum, and Nez Perce tribes made a formal request that they would be repatriated. The Corps gave public notice September 17, 1996, that it would repatriate the remains, but Chatters had contacted other anthropologists and archaeologists to challenge the order, arguing that the Repatriation Act was a threat to the study of the origins of Native Americans. A month later, 8 scientists filed suit in the U.S. District Court in Portland to block the repatriation and gain access to the remains for study. They argued that the age of the remains and the near completeness of the skeleton and an apparent lack of resemblance to Native Americans made the discovery significant and one that should be studied. During the trial, the custody of the remains were transferred from the Corps to the U.S. Department of Interior, and they were placed at the court order at the University of Washington's Burke Museum, which was deemed a neutral repository. At that time, no suitable DNA samples were able to be obtained from the Ancient One, but scientists said bone measurements showed the remains were most strongly resembled Polynesians with some characteristics of Native Americans, Europeans, and Asians as well. Then on August 30th, 2002, rejecting an Interior Department order to repatriate the bones, Magistrate Judge John Gelderks ruled that the Repatriation Act did not apply since scientific studies showed no relationship between the tribes and the Ancient One, and that oral traditions, which Minthorn said went back 10,000 years, were not sufficient evidence to justify repatriation. The ruling was affirmed by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and both sides opted not to go to the U.S. Supreme Court for fear of setting a bad precedent for either side. After that, studies commenced on the remains, and Native Americans regularly visited the museum to perform ceremonies on the Ancient One's behalf. During that time, the remains were never displayed publicly. In 2014, Richard Jantz and Douglas Owsley, 2 of the scientists who went to court, edited theirs and their colleagues' findings in the book Kennewick Man, The Scientific Investigation of Ancient American Skeleton, and asserted that the remains were more closely related to Polynesians and other Pacific nations than Native Americans. Within a year, scientists in Denmark definitively refuted that assertion and validated what the Yakima and other Native people had said all along. Taking advantage of advancements in DNA technology, a team at the University of Copenhagen announced in June 2015 that the Ancient One was more closely related to Native Americans than any other group, and that the Colville tribe shared ancestry with him. Scientists at the University of Chicago verified the results in April 2016, and the repatriation process began again, with the tribes having to establish cultural connections with the Ancient One. This time, Congress stepped in, not to stop the repatriation, but to move it along more quickly. U.S. Senator Patty Murray and U.S. Rep. Denny Hick, both Washington Democrats, sponsored the Bring the Ancient One Home Act of 2015, requiring the remains be repatriated within 90 days. U.S. Rep. Dan Newhouse, a Sunnyside Republican whose district includes the area where the ancient one was found, also supported the bill, and with Murray attached it to the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act, guaranteeing its passage. President Obama signed the act into law in December 2016, calling for the ancient one to be transferred to the State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, which would in turn transfer the remains back to the tribes. On February 17, 2017, representatives of the 5 tribes met at the Burke Museum to receive the remains, including vials of DNA samples taken from them and the spear point, and they drove to Richland. The next day, representatives of the tribes went to an undisclosed location in the Columbia Plateau's high desert to rebury the remains in a washout ceremony. The return of our ancestor to Mother Earth is a blessing to all Yakima people. Then Yakima Tribal Chair Joe D. Goudet said in a news release, "The Ancient One may now finally find peace, and we, his relatives, will equally feel content knowing that this work has been completed on his behalf." It Happened Here is a weekly history column by Yakima Herald Republic reporter Donald W. Myers, and I've linked to the entire article in the show notes for you to peruse.
Welcome to the podcast, World Awakenings, the Fast Track to Enlightenment YouTube channel. World Awakenings is the channel that seeks the knowledge and answers to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening. And we do that by having some of the world's greatest teachers, authors, and experts as our guests. If you're seeking a better, healthier, happier, more loving, joyful, and abundance-filled life, then you've come to the right place. The World Awakenings, the Fast Track to Enlightenment podcast with me, your host, Carl Gruber. If you want to know more about the law of attraction, A Course in Miracles, metaphysics, trance channels, energy and chakra healing, and more, you'll find it right here on the World Awakenings channel. This is the podcast, World Awakenings, the Fast Track to Enlightenment. Welcome to the show.
The Columbia River has looming over it the legend of the Bridge of the Gods. From Wikipedia, Native American lore contains numerous legends to explain the eruptions of Mount St. Helens and other volcanoes in the Cascade volcanic arc. We will be talking about Mount St. Helens soon, I promise. The most famous of these is the Bridge of the Gods legend, told by the Klickitats. In their tale, the chief of all the gods, Tahi-Seghali, and his 2 sons, Pato, also Klickitat and East, traveled down the Columbia River from far north in search of a suitable area to settle. They came upon an area that is now called the Dalles and thought they had never seen a land so beautiful. The sons quarreled over the land, and to solve the dispute, their father shot 2 arrows from his mighty bow, one to the north and the other to the south. Pato followed the arrow to the north and settled there, while East did the same for the arrow to the south. Seghali then built 10 mahawas, the Bridge of the Gods, so his family could meet periodically. When the 2 sons of Seghali both fell in love with a beautiful maiden named Luwit, she could not choose between them. The 2 young chiefs fought over her, burying villages and forests in the process. The area was devastated, and the earth shook so violently that the huge bridge fell into the river, creating the Cascades Rapids of the Columbia River Gorge. For punishment, Seghali struck down each of the lovers and transformed them into great mountains where they fell. East, with his head lifted in pride, became the volcano known today as Mount Hood, and Pato, with his head bent toward his fallen love, was turned into Mount Adams. The fair Luwit became Mount St. Helens, known to the Klickitats as Luwala Klo, which means smoking or fire mountain in their language. There are other legends that haunt the banks of the Columbia River. I found the legend of She Who Watches from Weird U.S. Pacific Northwest Native Americans believe that the earth had gone through several different ages. This legend dates to the beginning of the modern age, but long before the coming of the white man. There are several versions of this memory, including this one, a favorite of Weird Washington's Jeff Davis. Long ago in the before time, the Great Spirit wandered the world. He traveled along the great river, the Columbia, and stopped at a village. He asked the people if they lived well or in poverty. They said that they were happy because of the guidance of their chief. He asked where their chief was, and they pointed to the hills above their village. He went up to the hills and found a woman sitting in front of a hut, looking down at the village. She told him she was the chief and she looked after her people, teaching them how to build and live well. He told her, "The world is changing and women will no longer be chiefs. What will you do now?" The woman asked the Great Spirit to turn her into stone so that she could continue watching over her people. As a sign of mercy, he did just that, and her image was painted into the rock face, overlooking her village. In the local dialect, she is Sagigla Lala, and she who watches. And the petroglyph is, if you do a Google search, I could try to describe it, but really it's a very haunting and beautiful petroglyph. Part of it has been engraved into the stone. The other part has been painted, and you can still go see it on a guided tour. But because of some defacing that has occurred in the past of it, it has to be a park ranger that takes you to the site to see She Who Watches. But I encourage you to click on the link in the show notes and take a look at her countenance. It's quite stunning. At the mouth of the Columbia River sits the particularly dangerous Columbia Bar. This sandbar is about 3 miles wide and reaches about 6 miles into the ocean. This navigational nightmare has claimed over 2,000 vessels and 700 lives since 1792. The mouth of the Columbia near Astoria, known as Graveyard of the Pacific, has a worldwide reputation. U.S. Coast Guard Station Cape Disappointment responds to hundreds of calls in these dangerous waters. This Coast Guard station is also home to the National Motor Lifeboat School. The construction of the Cape Disappointment Lighthouse in 1856 and the North Head Lighthouse in 1898 have reduced the number of shipwrecks that occur at the mouth of the Columbia River. These lighthouses continue to operate today. The Columbia Pacific Heritage Museum's current exhibition features photographs, artifacts, and first-hand accounts from shipwrecks that happened in the area. If you visit their website or live near the area, snag a free copy of Shipwrecks Along the Discovery Trail for a self-guided tour along that peninsula. For panoramic views of the Columbia Bar, hike the Cape Disappointment Trail to the lighthouse. You can also visit the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center. There you can enjoy more than just views. Inside, the first order Fresnel lens for the Cape Disappointment Lighthouse and a life-saving service surfboat are on display. Here are a few notable shipwrecks off the Long Beach Peninsula, which I found on their website. May 3rd, 1830, the Isabella. This Hudson Bay Company supply ship sank off Sand Island near the mouth of the Columbia River. In 1986, a diver discovered the wreck while trying to free a snagged fishing net. The shipwreck is now an Oregon State or archaeological site. It is significant for being the only known example of this type of vessel from the era. July 18, 1841, Peacock. This U.S. naval brig gave the Peacock Spit of the Columbia Bar its name. The captain carefully followed the charts, but the ship still hit the spit. The crew had to abandon the Peacock after hours of trying to free the ship. January 9, 1853, Vandalia. This is a reminder to jump in and help when you see someone or something in distress. A ship captain reported seeing the Vandalia struggling, but it did not appear to need help. The ship washed up a week later near Mackenzie Head. 4 bodies also washed up with the wreck, including Captain E.N. Beard. Beard's Hollow at Cape Disappointment State Park now bears the captain's name. January 15, 1909, Alice. During a storm, a French square-rigged ship, the Alice, ran aground near Ocean Park with 3,000 tons of cement. The entire crew made it to shore, but the cement hardened, causing it to sink deep into the sand. The mast and rigging became a landmark and tourist attraction until about 1930. Today, the Alice makes rare appearances during extreme low tides. January 5th, 1928, North Bend, known as the ship that walked on land. The North Bend got stuck on the Peacock Spit and remained there for a year. The waves around the ship began cutting a channel in the sand, leading it into Baker Bay intact. April 3rd, 1941, Václav Vorovsky. The Václav Vorovsky wrecked in the Columbia Bar with an estimated 40,000 cases of lard. A bakery in Astoria bought the lard for $4 a case. I just love that. Talk about reduce, reuse, recycle. February 13th, 1947, Arrow. The Army bought this ship in 1942, and it became a passenger liner in the Hawaiian Islands. The ship was set to retire, but as it was being hauled to Astoria, the tow line broke loose in bad weather. It washed ashore in Ocean Park. Years later, the city bought the masts of the ship and used it to mark the beach approach as a war memorial, which is kind of beautiful. Near Astoria, the graveyard of the Pacific, dwells a legendary sea creature named Colossal Claude. Thanks to the folks at the Willamette Weekly, I'm going to teach you a bit about Claude and skim over what items you need if you decide to dress up as Claude for your next office party. First reported by crew members aboard the Columbia Lightship in 1934, Colossal Claude is a river monster, once spotted at the mouth of the Columbia River. According to a member of the crew, the water serpent was roughly 40 feet long with an 8-foot neck, round body, a, quote, mean-looking tail, and, quote, an evil, snaky look to its head. While the creature hasn't been seen since the 1950s, another water-dwelling beast was supposedly caught on tape by Shell oil workers on an oil drilling expedition near Astoria in 1963. They dubbed it Marvin the Monster, although some insist it was none other than Claude. Okay, I promised you about the costume, right? The costume components are a spandex bodysuit, oven mitts, swim fins, a large cardboard tube for your neck, a length of barbed wire for the tail, or you could use yarn and do knots in it, a snake mask. Toss those pieces together and you transform yourself into Colossal Claude. The petroglyph of the Columbia River Devil. This petroglyph could depict a known creature, maybe a prehistoric sturgeon. This is my question. There are two legends from the banks of the Columbia that may or may not be linked. The first is an unusual petroglyph depicting a, quote, river devil or river monster, said to be a spirit that dwells in the depths of the Columbia. It's known to pull people into the water's depths and drown them. Little else is known about this very unusual figure. It's audio, so I'll try to describe it the best I can. The petroglyph has this giant heart-shaped face with two prominent eyes and a toothy jaw of sharp fangs on the top and bottom. There are wave-like strings hanging off the bottom of the face and a spiral in the space above his face that also features whiskers and is near what looks to be depictions of reedy grasses or kelp to my eyes. Was this an early attempt to draw and also warn others of the dangers of the prehistoric sturgeon, which are known to swim in the depths of the Columbia to this day? From ColumbiaRiverImages.com, here's their description. The white sturgeon is the largest freshwater fish in North America. It lives along the west coast of the United States, with the largest number being in the Columbia River Basin. Mature sturgeon can reach 20 feet in length, weigh between 1,000 and 2,000 pounds, and they can live for 100 years. White sturgeon looked nearly identical to the fish that prowled river bottoms over 100 million years ago.
Hey everybody, Karen Rontowski here. I hate to interrupt the Curious Cat podcast, one of my favorites, But if you want to double your paranormal fun when you're done here, come check out my show, Paranormal Karen. I interview exorcists, demonologists, healers, psychics, really anyone that can make a family gathering uncomfortable is on my show. If you want to see everything I do, go to KarenRontowski.com. And I know you're thinking, that sounds hard to spell. Well, it is. I have misspelled it on hundreds of tax forms. So if that doesn't work for you, go to PsychicStandup.com or ParanormalKaren.com. There you can find my Patreon. You can book a tarot reading. You can take a tarot class. You can find everything, including my stand-up comedy clips. That's right, I've been doing stand-up for 30 years. If you go to those places, you can also see my psychic stand-up show where I mix psychic and tarot readings. Yes, the future never looked so funny. So check me out at KarenRontowski.com, ParanormalKaren.com, or PsychicStandup.com. And can someone please find me a marketing person to put all this in one place? Now back to the show.
Okay, at the top of the show, I mentioned my mossy $20 bill that I found in the waters of the Columbia. It was coated in brown slime. It was caught underneath a large rock. I pulled the bill free and ran home with it, doing my best impression of Charlie from the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie when he found his golden ticket. My family immediately joked with me that it was probably one of D.B. Cooper's lost $20 bills. They said if it was, it could be worth quite a bit more money. Well, I was only slightly tempted, but after, I would say, 10 minutes or so of consideration, I put back on my shoes and biked to Kmart, where I spent my find on 45 records and makeup. Sure, I'd heard a bit about the plane hijacker D.B. Cooper, but it wasn't until I was an adult that I grasped the boldness of his crime. Here's the D.B. Cooper 411 from an FBI website on the famous case. On the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, a nondescript man calling himself Dan Cooper approached the counter of Northwest Orient Airlines in Portland, Oregon. He used cash to buy a one-way ticket on Flight 305 bound for Seattle, Washington. Thus began one of the great unsolved mysteries in FBI history. Cooper was a quiet man who appeared to be in his mid-40s, wearing a business suit with a black tie and a white shirt. He ordered a drink, bourbon and soda, while the flight was waiting to take off. A short time after 3 p.m., he handed the stewardess a note indicating that he had a bomb in his briefcase and wanted her to sit with him. The stunned stewardess did as she was told. Opening a cheap attaché case, Cooper showed her a glimpse of a mass of wires and red-colored sticks and demanded that she write down what he told her. Soon she was walking a new note to the captain of the plane that demanded 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills. When the flight landed in Seattle, the hijacker exchanged the flight's 36 passengers for the money and parachutes. Cooper kept several crew members and the plane took off again, ordered to set a course for Mexico City. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, a little after 8 p.m., the hijacker did the incredible. He jumped out of the back of the plane with a parachute and the ransom money. The pilots landed safely, but Cooper had disappeared into the night and his ultimate fate remains a mystery to this day. The FBI officially closed the case in 2016 as unsolved, but online sleuths and a few professional groups are continuing to try and find out the identity of D.B. Cooper to this day. Dan Cooper, which is the name the man purchased his ticket under, requested his money be in random serial numbers, so my found 20 might never have been linked back to his crime. That's what I tell myself at least, so I don't feel bad about my choices. Mascara, lip gloss, and some hot 45s were well worth it. Oh, also, I ran down photos discovered in a sandbar not far from Vancouver, Washington, not long before I found my money. The waters of the Columbia had done a number on them. My bill was still intact, whereas theirs had the edges eaten away. It's those images that help me sleep at night. Like the Cascade Mountain Range, from centuries-old legends to unsolved mysteries today, the Columbia River still holds many secrets. I can't wait to see what we discover next. Yes, nature is powerful. It's also wondrous and magical. Just a moment standing within a forest or at the edge of a riverbed shrinks the ego and heals the soul. I hope Cascadia inspires you to dust off your backpack and venture into the wild. Who knows what mysteries lie ahead on the trail? If you happen to encounter something supernatural, drop us a line at curious_cat_podcast@icloud.com. Maybe your story will be featured in an upcoming episode. We're exploring the rumor-riddled Cascade Mountain Range, a land of fire and ice. From Sasquatch to UFOs, to remote viewing, to bottomless pits, to unexplained missing persons, to ancient battles over good and evil, find new episodes on the regular Curious Cat stream. Original art for Cascadia by @Nora's_Unnamed_Photos. Find and follow them on Instagram. If you venture outside, be safe and have fun. Until next time, stay curious. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter @CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.